Welcome to a brand new episode of a new podcast that we're doing. It's called Wednesday Night Mysteries. Basically, we named this podcast because hopefully these episodes will be airing live on Wednesday nights. Hopefully, you guys will enjoy. I'm joined by my co host, Rain. Hello, Rain. How are you doing on this evening? Are you ready to delve deep into frankly, I would say, one of the most spooky mysteries coming from Northern California area?
Yeah, hi viewers and hello everybody. My name is Rain. And yeah, I'm more than ready. I've read about this case and this was a very spooky one that I've seen so far. And when I suggested about it, you were completely fine with it, completely okay and completely excited. And yep,
Let's do this.
let's do this.
We have some notes prepared, and I guess let's just jump right into the notes. So some of the people that know me personally, I've done the Solvable Mysteries podcast in the past, and I had covered this episode that was I don't remember the exact number of the podcast on which we covered this Yuba County Five mystery, but I do recall that it was really spooky. So some of the audience members might already remember some of the details, but I hope you guys will be interested enough to kind of join us again here because we want to delve deep, maybe take a fresh new approach, and
And we came up with our own theory.
Well, I think the theory is. I think it's not our original theory, but we kind of have our own variation of the
Our own
original.
take on it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's begin with the introduction of this case. So basically, and by the way, Rain, just stop me at any point if you have anything else to add to this. So I'll just begin with that the Yuba County Five were a group of young men from Yuba City, California, with mild intellectual disabilities or psychiatric conditions who attended a college basketball game at California State University in Chico on the night of February 24th, 1978. Now, who are these men? So four of them, Bill Sterling, who was 29, Jack Hewitt, who was 24, Ted Weir, who was 32, Jack Madruga, who was 30, these guys were found dead, while the fifth member, Gary Matthias, who was 25, he has never been found. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Rain, but Gary Matthias was the only one from the group who didn't have mental disabilities. He had schizophrenia.
Yeah, exactly. From what I read, three of these men have a diagnosis of mental disability. However, the second Jack Madruga, who had no official diagnosis, but his family believed that he had mental disorder. Whereas Gary Matthias was the only one without any, but he was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was serving in the U.S. Army.
Gotcha. I had no idea. So it was Jack Madruga who did not have an official diagnosis, right?
No.
And Jack Madruga, out of the five, was him and Gary were the only two individuals who had a driver's license, correct?
Yeah, from what I read, yeah, that is correct.
All right, but we'll get into it shortly. Now, several days after their disappearance, the group's Mercury Montego, that was driven by Jack Madruga, was found abandoned in a remote area of Plumas National Forest on a high mountain dirt road that was far out of their way back to Yuba City. Investigators could not determine why the car was abandoned, as it was in good working order and could have easily been pushed out of the snowpack it was in. A little over 3 months after that, in June of the same year, 1978, once the snow had melted in those mountains where the car was abandoned, four of the men's bodies were found in a near trailer camp used by backpackers as shelter, deep in the forest. This was actually 20 miles away from where the car was abandoned. Only bones were left of the three bodies in the woods, a result of scavenging animals, but one in the trailer, Ted Weir, had apparently lived for as long as 3 months after the men were last seen. He starved to death despite an ample supply of food and heating materials nearby. Ted was missing his shoes, and investigators found Matthias's own shoes, I'm talking about Gary Matthias, in the nearby woods, suggesting that Gary had also survived for some time beyond the last night they were seen alive. I think it's a good time also for us to describe these men more in detail. So, Rain, I think you have prepared more insightful information regarding them, so you can take it away.
Yeah, I did a little bit of note taking, but at this part, we're going to talk about the boys. They are a group of friends, ages from 24 to 32, from Yuba City, California. They all have either mild intellectual disabilities or a psychiatric condition. The men, as you said, or the boys, as their family were referring them to, they were all into sports, most especially basketball. You love basketball, right?
Yeah, I come from a basketball country, so I definitely know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so here we go. This love for sports led them all to meet in a rehab center for the handicapped called Gateway, where they were engaged in different activities and they had a basketball team called the Gateway Gators. Unfortunately, this same love for sports would lead them into the most unfortunate circumstance. Let's talk about Gary Dale Mathias first. Gary, or Gary Mathias, was a 25-year-old man and was the only one in the group without a learning or a suspected learning disability. In fact, at one point in 1973, Gary was in the US Army and was stationed in West Germany. However, during those times, he was a heavy user of drugs. After a while, he was discharged from the Army due to psychiatric reasons and was diagnosed with schizophrenia, which during that time led to into really violent outbursts and paranoia.
Right. Really quickly, just wanted to speculate here. Do we know what kind of drugs he was addicted to? Because during my research, I wasn't able to find this. So have you seen anything?
No, I haven't really read anything. What specific drug he was using.
Addicted to, yeah. But apparently these drugs caused him to develop schizophrenia. And I think this is why he got discharged.
Mm-hmm.
So he was serving in the early 70s. He was serving in the US Army and he was stationed in West Germany. That's where he became addicted.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then after that, there were police records. Police records showed that he became violent on occasion and was charged with assault twice. Very violent.
This is after he already developed schizophrenia, right?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Which led him to develop sudden outbursts.
Damn.
Yeah. One more interesting thing about him, though, was his ability to travel long distances on foot. It was said that he had once walked over 500 miles after escaping the asylum he was staying at before.
Oh my god. How do you even do this?
I can't even walk 5 miles straight.
Yeah, 5 miles takes forever. This guy walked 500 miles?
Yep.
Pretty sure he probably hitchhiked as well, right? Or did he literally just walk?
From what I read, it just said that he just walked.
Oh my god. Okay.
But eventually he managed to control his illness through daily medication. He lived a fairly stable life for over the next couple of years, and he even worked part-time in his father-in-law's landscaping business. And one more thing, before the night of the disappearance, Gary was so excited and even reminded his mom to wake him up and not let him oversleep the following morning.
Oh, so he was really excited for that basketball game, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I've also found information on him that he was treated with some antipsychotic drugs, and his physicians, and this is the quote that we found on Wikipedia, said that he was one of their sterling success cases. So I think he was at the age of 25, probably dealing with schizophrenia and kind of keeping it under control. Obviously, when we delve deeper into the story, we probably think that it's questionable.
But he was pretty okay for the last 2 years. He was completely stable, not affecting him at all. So I think his illness was completely in the bag. They were controlling it very well.
Yeah, but makes you question. Maybe there are still triggers that could...
That is true. There could still potentially be triggers.
Exactly.
Shall we go to Theodore
Of course.
Ted Weir?
Yep.
Okay, so Ted or Theodore Weir we could refer to him as Ted, was the oldest one in the group. He was 32 years old and described to be showing signs of autism. Ted was also said to be outgoing, filled with positivity, and was really friendly, but in a child's way, wherein he would even wave at strangers.
He would wave to strangers, yeah. And I think I've read about Ted that his parents, I think, said that he lacked common sense. Isn't Ted the one who apparently bought a bunch of pencils one time? Is this?
Yeah. Actually, although he was very nice and friendly, he does appear to have lack basic common sense. According to his family, one night, Ted had to be dragged out of bed while his bedroom ceiling was burning due to a house fire because he was afraid that he would miss his job if he got up.
Oh my god. Do we have any, sorry for interrupting, would you have any information about what he was doing for work?
Oh, he worked in a snack bar.
Oh.
Yeah, I believe he was a janitor at first and then he worked at the snack bar, but because of the stress, his family urged him to quit.
Right.
Yeah.
So he got a promotion essentially, right? Janitor, and then he moved up to manning the bar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's pretty interesting because when you're working at the bar, I would assume you're kind of dealing with clients, dealing with money. So if you're someone who lacks common sense, how does that work? Well, it probably works. It's the 70s. I mean, probably things work somehow.
Yeah, but apparently it caused him a lot of stress that his family urged him to quit.
Yeah, I could see their reasoning, of course.
Yeah, too. There was also a time, though, where Ted spent over $100 for pencils for no reason at all. And Ted also apparently did not understand the reason why we have to stop at stop signs.
When driving the car, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's pretty interesting.
I mean, he's a good person. From all accounts that I've read, he's a good person, but...
Very good. Very nice.
Very nice, but, you know, he definitely needed some assistance to go through life, right? Couldn't make decisions on his own. And this is important because later on, his death is very mysterious. Wouldn't you agree?
Definitely.
And I think we will probably come back to this point that he has a lack of common sense. And maybe that had led to his demise. Well, that's coming up, so we can continue.
Yeah, but before that, though, before the night of the disappearance, Ted's grandma urged Ted to take a coat with him.
Okay.
Yeah, and Ted said, "Oh, Grandma, I don't need a coat. Not tonight."
Okay. I know it's spooky because this was happening in February in the northern part of California. When you think about California, you would probably think that, at least us as people who've never been to the United States, we probably think California of like beaches and good weather all year round.
Warm weather.
But apparently Northern California is not like that at all, or at least that part of the, mountainous regions around like north of San Francisco. Sacramento. But yeah, so the grandmother urged him to wear the jacket, but he said, "I won't need it."
Yeah, it gives us a lot of insight, actually, because it just only goes to show that they don't have any plans of going up the mountains.
Going anywhere after what they were originally doing. So for people who are maybe a little confused what their original plan was, I'll get back to it after we're done covering the rest of the group. I think we still have 3 individuals left.
Yep. Okay, really quickly. Jack Hewitt was the youngest one in the group. He was only 24 years of age. He was also the most severely handicapped. He was diagnosed with mild learning disabilities and had an extreme hatred in conversing to a phone, to the point that his brother often took most of his calls from him. And as mentioned earlier as well, Ted, Jack's closest friend out of the group, would also help him out in this regard. So he basically hates talking on the phone so much that other people would step in and help him out with it.
Interesting. That's a very specific thing to be afraid of, don't you think?
It was very specific, yep. It was said that Jack and Ted were the best friends, and they did most of the things together. Right.
So Ted and Jack, Ted Weir and Jack Hewitt, they're close. They're the close.
Practically like brothers.
Yeah. These group of guys, they're all kind of friends, but you know that Ted
They buddied up with each
And
other.
Jack Hewitt were kind of...
Big buddies, yep.
Yeah, big buddies. Okay.
Okay, so the next one is William Lee Sterling, or we could also call him Bill. He was 29 years old and was also diagnosed with mild learning disorder. He was described as deeply spiritual, can often be found in the library reading books or religious texts, and then he would share those knowledge to mental hospitals and help others find God and faith. He was apparently not a big fan of the outdoors, according to his family. After one night, they went fishing, and they went on a fishing trip. Bill never wanted to go again. So I think we have to remember that so far, Bill hated outdoors.
And isn't it correct that this area where Bill's father took him fishing is actually very close to the place where the group's car was abandoned?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a case where his father took him there once, but he didn't like it, so he never went there again when his father would go on his own. So that's something to take into account, of course.
Definitely. And the last one is Jack Madruga. He was 30 years old and he's the one with no official diagnosis. But his family only believed him to have mild learning disabilities. He was a high school graduate and he was also a U.S. Army veteran. Jack drove a turquoise-white 1969 Mercury Montego that the boys used in order to go to Chico.
To watch the basketball game, exactly.
According to his family, that car, that Mercury Montego, was Jack's pride and joy, so he would definitely take care of it.
Yeah.
And lastly,
sorry for interrupting, but I think, I've read that Jack really liked his car and he would not allow anyone else to drive. So he was the driver, and apparently Gary Matthias also had the driving license, right? But apparently what the parents said that Jack Madruga would not let anyone touch the car. It was his baby, basically.
Definitely. And hey, last thing to remember is that Jack Madruga was best friends with Bill. So basically, they're buddies again.
Oh, so wait, Bill Sterling is already best buddies with both Jacks? Is that what I'm...
We have two Jacks, remember?
Oh, sorry. So
Bill was besties or best buddies with Jack Madruga. And then our second Jack
is the best friend of Ted.
Yep.
Okay, so where's Gary? Is he even a friend of these guys?
I think they're close friends, but these four men have buddies.
Right, so Jack Hewitt is buddies with Ted. Jack Madruga is buddies with Bill. And Gary, the only person without any mental disabilities, is kind of there. Wikipedia says that he is a good friend of these guys. I mean, maybe he was just someone who played basketball with them and was like a friendly guy, but...
Could be.
Would you agree with Wikipedia that he was as close as everyone else? Or, because Wikipedia made it seem that Gary Matthias, the individual who was probably the most different from the group, he was also part of the gang. But I think some other sources kind of state that he was not super close with the rest of the guys, right? Well, he was close, but not as close.
Yeah, maybe. I think it could possibly be they're friends, or Gary was friends with them, but the friendship isn't as deep as with the others.
Exactly. At this point, unless you have anything else to add about any of these individuals, shall we move on to the actual, I guess, events that led to their disappearance?
The night of the disappearance?
Yeah, well, kind of a little bit prior to the night, right? So, on February 25th, let's remember that they disappeared on February 24th, but what they actually planned to do on the following day of their disappearance, originally on the 25th of February 1978, the five men were supposed to play their first game in a week-long tournament sponsored by Special Olympics, for which the winners would get a free week in Los Angeles. Let's remember that these guys were part of a basketball team,
Gateway Gators,
and they were supposed to play a game on the 25th. Now, the five men had prepared the night before, some even laying out their uniforms and asking their parents to wake them up on time. Now, one day before that, on the day when they disappeared, on February 24th, the group decided to drive to Chico, which is another town in, I guess, the more northern part of California, to cheer on the UC Davis basketball team in an away game against Chico State. Jack Madruga, the only member of the group besides Gary Matthias who had a driver's license, drove the group 50 miles north from Yuba City to Chico in his 1969 Mercury Montego. The men were dressed in light coats, as you recall. So basically, they were not prepared to go hiking, right? However, the temperature was cool in the upper Sacramento Valley at night that time of the year. Okay, so after the UC Davis team won the game, the group got back into Madruga's car and drove a short distance from the Chico State campus to Bears Market. This is still happening in downtown Chico. Now, at the market, the group bought snacks along with sodas and cartons of milk to drink. It was shortly before the store's 10 p.m. closing time. Now, the clerk later remembered these men because she was annoyed that such a large group had come in and delayed her from beginning the process of closing the store for the night. So this is probably the most credible sighting, and this is probably could in theory be the last known sighting of them. We will talk about 2 other sightings, but wouldn't you agree that this is the last sighting of the men that we know for sure that has happened?
Yeah, I completely agree. And you know that the store clerk remembers them because it would have been so annoying. You're about to close the shop and then 5 men came in, bought a bunch of stuff. You would remember them, right?
Exactly. And later on, these items were found in their car. So we know for a fact that they definitely were there and bought these items. Now, none of the men were seen alive again after that point. At their homes, some of their parents stayed up to make sure they returned when morning came and none of the men came back home from Chico back to Yuba City. The parents called the police and the investigation began. Now, police in Butte and Yuba counties began searching along the route the men took to Chico. They found no sign of them, but a few days later, a Plumas National Forest ranger told investigators that he had seen the Montego vehicle parked along Orwell/Quincy Road in the forest on February 25th. At that time, this particular forest ranger who witnessed the car did not consider the sighting significant since many residents often drive up that road into the Sierra Nevada on winter weekends to go cross-county skiing on the extensive trail system. But after he read the missing persons bulletin, he recognized the car and led deputies to the car on February 28th. At that point, it was 3 days into the disappearance. Now let's talk about what law enforcement actually found at this car, in the car. So inside the car was evidence suggesting that the men had been inside of the car between when they were last seen in Chico in that store and when the car was abandoned. What this means is that inside of the vehicle there were wrappers, empty cartons and cans that they had purchased in Chico. A neatly folded roadmap of California was also found in the car. Investigators initially could not explain why the car was left abandoned in the Plumas National Forest. This was basically 70 miles away from Chico, and for our European listeners, that's 110 kilometers, far off any direct route to Yuba City. Because let's remember, the original plan was for them to go to Chico, watch a basketball game, and then go back home to Yuba City. But instead, they managed to get their car stuck in Plumas National Forest. None of the men's families could also speculate as to why they might have driven up a long and winding dirt road on a winter night deep into a high elevation remote forest without any extra clothing, and on the night before a basketball game they had been discussing excitedly for several weeks. So, what do you think? I mean, we will jump into the theories, but wouldn't you agree with me that this is very strange? The men clearly had an interest to attend their first game of the season on the 25th, but instead they winded up on some weird national forest, snowy mountainous road. What's happening here?
Well, it's a little bit obvious that it's not planned, because come to think of it, Gary actually asked his mother to wake him up the next day for the basketball game that they have to attend to, and then some of the boys actually laid down their uniforms because they were so excited for it. And Ted's grandma, when she urged him to take his coat, he was like, "Oh, no need, Grandma. I don't need it, not tonight." So it was pretty obvious that they had no intentions whatsoever to derail or to go to a scenic route.
Exactly. And I would like to add to that Jack Madruga's parents said that he did not like the cold weather and he had never been up in the mountains. Bill Sterling's father had once taken his son to that particular area near where the car was found for a fishing weekend, but Bill did not enjoy it and hasn't gone ever since. So it looks like at least some of these guys definitely did never even have an interest in that area. So why would they go there? Definitely mysterious. Police could not figure out why the men had abandoned their car as well. They had reached 4,400 feet 4,400 feet in elevation along the road, about where the snow line was at that time of year, just short of where the road was closed off for the winter. Now, the car apparently had become stuck in the snow drifts, and there was evidence that the men had tried to spin the wheels to get out of it. Police noted that the snow was not deep that police noted that the snow was not so deep that 5 healthy young men would not have been able to push it out of the snowdrift. The keys were not present in the car. When police hot-wired the car, the engine started immediately, and the fuel gauge indicated that the gasoline tank was 1/4 full. So it seemed like the car was in working order. They had enough gas. They should have been able to push it out of the snow. The car was also unlocked and had a window rolled down when it was found. The most bizarre thing for me personally, and maybe this is just how Wikipedia described this particular detail, was the fact that this car's undercarriage had no dents, gauges, or even mud scrapes whatsoever, not even on its low-hanging muffler, despite having been driven a long distance up a mountain road with many bumps and ruts. I'm sorry, not nuts. Well, there probably were some nuts, but like what I'm trying to say is that there were bumps and ruts. Now, the driver of the vehicle must have been extremely careful, or it was someone familiar with the road. The driver, Jack Madruga, was not familiar with this particular area. His family said that he would not let someone else drive the car. So how do you have any thoughts about why the car was apparently in mint condition, but it was supposed to be all banged up there in the mountains?
Yeah, but we also have to remember that Jack Madruga's car was his baby. It was his most prized possession, so even if they made a wrong turn and they drove up there, he would have been very careful. Right?
Actually, that's amazing. That's a very good point. I didn't even think about that perspective. So maybe he was driving slow.
He was driving slow and careful not to damage his baby.
Exactly. Maybe that's why he didn't want to aggressively try to push it out of the snow or something like that. Maybe he was like, just let's, they have some mental disability. Some of them lack common sense. Maybe their thinking was, let's just go somewhere. Let's wait until the snow melts or something.
That's a good point.
Exactly. So efforts to search the local vicinity were hampered by the severe snowstorm on that particular day when police enforcement found the car. So I think the law enforcement were brought to the car by the park ranger 3 days into their disappearance. And there was a big snowstorm that day. And 2 days later, search efforts were called off due to continuing bad weather. So apparently the men couldn't be found because I think even some of the members from the search party almost got lost, right?
Yeah, from what I read, the snowstorm was very heavy and they had to stop it because of it.
All right, so I think at this point in the podcast, it's a good place for us to start talking about sightings. Now, police received several reports of the men being sighted. However, most of these reports were easily dismissed, but 2 of the sightings stood out. So let's bring in a man called Joseph Shones into this case. He was a native of Sacramento, and he told police that he had spent the night of February, the night from the 24th to the 25th of February, near where the Montego was found. He had apparently driven up to the mountains where he had a cabin, and at around 5:30 p.m., about 150 feet up the road, his car got stuck in the snow as well. As he was trying to free the car, he realized he was beginning to experience early symptoms of a heart attack and went back into his car, keeping the engine running to provide heat. Talk about the worst timing of all time to have a heart attack.
I know, and this was the 70s. No cell phones yet. You're all alone in there.
Exactly. 6 hours later, at 11:30 p.m., this man saw headlights coming up behind him. At this point, it was 6 hours of him experiencing excruciating heart attack pain. He was not a happy camper. Now he looked out the back and he saw a car parked behind him. Headlights were on, with a group of people around it. One of the people that he apparently saw was apparently a woman holding a baby. That's what he told law enforcement. He called them for help, but this is where things got so spooky to me, because as Joe Shones called for help to this group of people, the group of people stopped talking and turned their headlights off basically. Later he saw more lights from behind him, this time flashlights in particular, that also went out when he called for them. Isn't this the most spooky thing to imagine? You're a guy having a heart attack up in the mountains, and now you hear a group of people and some lights behind you, and you shout for help, thinking that you're saved. And then all of a sudden, the lights go out, and the voices go out.
That's definitely spooky. But we also have to consider the other people's point of view. What if we're on a road trip and we go up this mountain, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the night when it's so dark and it's snowy, we heard a voice crying out for help? You would stop? Would you stop?
I would like to say I would, but in reality,
it's creepy, right?
It's very creepy.
Yeah, so for some reason, I kind of understand these people as well.
But if these were really people, if this wasn't his hallucinations.
Exactly.
Now, I want to bring up that Mr. Shones said that at first that he also recalled another pickup truck parking 20 feet behind him briefly, and then continued to drive down the road. Although later he clarified to police that he could not be sure of that sighting in particular, since at that time he was almost delirious from the pain that he was in. Now, after Mr. Shones' car ran out of gas in the early morning hours on the 25th of February, his pain had actually subsided enough for him to walk 8 miles down the road to a lodge where the manager drove him back home. Now, as he was walking down, I would assume, the road, he passed the abandoned Montego at the point where he had recalled hearing the voices originate from. So this is probably the most, I would say, the detail that kind of makes me believe that he really did hear someone, because he was there for 6 hours. Mm-hmm. Why particularly in that moment? Why couldn't he heard something 3 hours into his heart attack, or 2 hours if he was hallucinating, but he heard something 6 hours into his heart attack experience. And the boys were also kinda on the road around the same time. So I think there's just too many coincidences. I really think there's a very big chance that Joe Shones did actually see. He did hear the boys, right? Did hear the boys. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I do agree.
Now, although I want to bring up that Ted's mother, one of the boys, Ted's mother, said ignoring someone's pleas for help was not like her son. She recalled how he and Bill Sterling actually had helped someone they knew get to a hospital after overdosing on Valium. But I want to also step in here and mention the fact that when Ted and Bill helped someone, it was someone they knew.
Yeah.
So maybe helping someone they know is something that they could do. Helping someone in the middle of the night
when it's so dark and nobody's around, everything is creepy.
And you're the one who's looking for help in the first place. It's not like they're just having a picnic out there. They're also stuck. So they're stressed out. And now they hear some guy shouting. I could see them just...
I don't know. Knowing you, it's out of character for you not to help someone, but if you're placed in that situation, when it's so dark, creepy, you're all abandoned, it's not a well-driven road, I don't think you would actually stop and help out. You would have doubts, no?
Doubts, especially if I'm the one who needs help. Like, my car's stuck also. I can't help you. You go help me. I need help.
But what if the other dude's a murderer?
Exactly.
You're gonna have doubts, right?
You have crazy doubts. It's the middle of nowhere at night.
You're gonna have fears.
Exactly. That's a good point.
There's another notable report, and it was from a woman who worked in a store in the small town of Brownsville, 30 miles or 48 kilometers from the point where the car has been abandoned, which they would have reached had they continued down the road from where the car has been found. On March 3rd, the woman who saw the flyers that have been distributed with the men's pictures and information about the $1,215 reward the families had put up told the deputies that 4 of them had stopped at a store in a red pickup truck 2 days after the disappearance. The store owner corroborated her account. The woman identified the 2 men as Jack Hewitt and Bill Sterling. They were in a telephone booth outside the store, while the other 2 went inside of the store. The store owner told the investigators that the man whom he believed to be Ted Weir and Jack Hewitt came in and brought burritos, chocolate milk, and soft drinks. Ted's brother said that driving to Brownsville in a different car would be completely out of character for them. And Jack Hewitt's brother also said that Jack hated using telephones to the point that he would answer his calls for Jack. What do you think about it?
I think
Is it credible?
Probably not, right? I think we both kind of have a sense that this is a person who saw the flyers and was very interested in the reward money.
Yeah, the timing is very suspicious.
Very suspicious, because now, at that point, maybe the person who reported this, maybe they thought, okay, they're disappeared and maybe I'm gonna get the reward money, but we know that these men, at least most of them, have been found dead. So it would mean that they have actually managed to find their way out of the mountains in a red pickup.
Where did they get that?
What is that all about? You know what I mean? So they managed to get out, went for snacks, got back to their original site where they got trapped and lost, and then they died. So basically, they took a little break from dying.
For snacks.
Yeah,
then
for
went
snacks.
Back to dying and disappearing.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense, right? So I feel like at the very least, it's not credible. And I would say at the very most, it's someone who's trying to exploit the situation.
I believe so.
Right. Now let's go over the discovery of the body. So the eventual discovery of 4 of the 5 men's bodies raised even more questions about what actually had happened that night. Now, on June 4th of the same year, and this is more than 3 months after the group had disappeared, and with most of the snow melted down, in those mountains, a group of motorcyclists went to a trailer maintained by the Forest Service at a campsite off the road. Now, this is about 19.4 miles from where the group's car had been found. The front window of this camper trailer had been broken. Now, when they opened the door, they found a decaying body on a bed with 8 sheets wrapped around it, including the head. The body was later identified as Ted Weir.
Can we just talk about how terrifying it must have been for the motorcyclist? Like, one moment you're just driving around, and the next moment you opened up a door to a trailer and you were punched by a strong, decaying scent, and you found a lifeless body there.
Exactly, and I mean, it's even creepier because, like, as I've read the description of Ted's, like how they found Ted, apparently he was wrapped up in 8 sheets and his head as well. So they just found a body outline decaying. They didn't even see like a body straight up. It was an outline of a body. So they had to probably unwrap it. I mean...
Or probably go around it to investigate.
Yeah, well, one way or another...
Stuff of nightmares.
Exactly, like it's one of the, craziest experiences of these people's life.
Probably it traumatized them for life.
Right, so let's talk a little bit about this Ted Weir's situation. So Ted had lost nearly 100 pounds. His beard growth suggested he had lived as long as 13 weeks from when he had last shaved. His feet were badly frostbitten, almost gangrenous. On a table next to the bed were some of Ted's personal belongings, including his wallet, including his cash, a nickel ring with Ted engraved on it, and a golden necklace he also wore. Also on the table there was this strange gold watch with its crystals, without its crystal, which Ted's family said was not his, and a partially melted candle. Now, Ted himself, he was wearing a velour shirt and lightweight pants, but his shoes could not be found. Now, let's go back to that gold watch. There's apparently a gold watch in this trailer that it hasn't been identified whom it belonged to. Definitely not Ted, from what we can say right now.
Probably one of the boys.
One of the boys, right? Because, I mean, maybe one of the boys had a gold watch and the family just...
How come it's not identified, though?
I don't know. Maybe it's Gary's.
Perhaps, yeah.
Right. Exactly. So, no fire had been set in that particular trailer's fireplace, despite an ample supply of matches and paperback novels to use as kindling. Heavy forestry clothing, which could have kept the men warm, also remained where they had been stored. A dozen sea ration cans. Sea ration cans are basically these, I think, dry food cans used in the military from a storage shed outside had been opened. So a dozen of these cans had been opened and their contents had been consumed, but a locker in the same shed that held an even greater assortment of dehydrated foods, enough to keep all 5 men fed for a year, if that had been necessary, had not even been opened. Now, another shed nearby held a butane tank with a valve that, had it been opened, would have fed the trailer's heating system. Ted's family said that he actually lacked common sense because he had a mental disability. Also, let's put it into account that Gary's tennis sneakers were in the trailer and the sea rations had been opened with a P38 can opener, which only Gary Matthias and Jack Madruga would have been familiar from their military service. So let's unpack what's happening here. So the motorcyclists find Ted's dead body in a trailer, seemingly filled with supplies, enough to last all 5 men the entire year. But he's dead. He didn't eat, he didn't wear clothes, he was all wrapped up in bed sheets, his head was wrapped up. Why is his head wrapped up? Why is he not wearing any shoes? What's happening here?
It seems like there was someone with him. could either be one of the boys or maybe two of the boys. Most likely. I think Gary was with him because you mentioned the fact that there were C rations that have been opened with a P38 can opener.
Yeah.
Gary or Jack would have been with him in order to open that. But let's also take into account the fact that he lacked basic common sense. So they probably went into that trailer. He was probably left alone and he didn't know what to do.
Exactly. Most likely. Now, I want to quickly go over some other information about where the other men have been found. So once this finding happened, once Ted Beer's body was found, searchers returned to the Plumas forest immediately, and they followed the road between the trailer where Ted was found and the site of the abandoned car. The next day, they actually found remains that were later identified as those of Jack Madruga, the driver of the car, and Bill Sterling on opposite sides of the road, 11.4 miles from where the car had been. Jack Madruga's body had been partially consumed by scavenging animals, and only scattered bones remained of Bill Sterling's body. Autopsies showed that they both died of hypothermia. Investigators think that one of them may have given into the need to sleep that comes with the last stage of hypothermia, while the other stayed by his side and died the same way. So wouldn't you agree that probably Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling, well, this kind of paints a picture to me that all of the five men, after they abandoned their car, were all heading in the same direction towards the trailer.
Yeah.
But just these two, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, just didn't make it, while the other three, they made it. But Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga died of hypothermia 11 miles into their trek.
Yeah, maybe they were walking and one of the boys couldn't make it. We also have to remember that Jack and Bill were best friends. So either one of them probably couldn't make it. So the other one just decided to stay with him.
Yeah, probably.
Right? Such an awful way to die, though.
Exactly. Your best friends, and you're dying. Terrible. Now, 2 days later, as part of one of the other search parties, Jack Hewitt's father found his son's backbone under a bush 2 miles northeast of the trailer. So, this tells me that Jack Hewitt probably made it.
A little bit more than those two.
But probably even made it to the trailer, wouldn't you agree? I mean, his body was found 2 miles away from the trailer. So I think...
Isn't it still pretty far away?
Well, I think it's suggested by investigators that him, Gary, and Ted actually made it to the trailers.
That's good.
At some point, probably he left the trailer for reasons unknown to us and died shortly after leaving the trailer, only 2 miles away.
I see.
Now, his shoes and jeans nearby helped identify his body. The next day, a deputy sheriff found a skull downhill from that particular bush, 300 feet away. It was confirmed by dental records, later to have been Jack's head, his skull. His death was also attributed to hypothermia. In an area to the northwest of the trailer, roughly a quarter mile, which is 400 meters from the trailer, searchers found 3 Forest Service blankets and a rusted flashlight by the road. It could not be determined how long those items had been there.
Question. Was that flashlight with them in the car or was it in the trailer?
It's important because of Joe Schoen's sighting, right?
Yeah.
Joe Schoen's remember seeing flashlights.
Could be an indicator.
Could be. If it was with them in the car already, I feel like
them.
Definitely could be them. You know what I mean? When Joe Schoen's was stuck. Right. So since Gary Matthias had presumably not taken his medication, pictures of him were distributed to mental institutions all over California. However, no trace of him has ever been found because let's remember, we have no idea what happened to Gary Matthias. He's the only person whose body has never been found. Now, let's talk a little bit about this one theory that law enforcement is kind of leaning towards, and I think to some extent we're also leaning towards it. Gary Matthias apparently had friends in the small town of Forbestown, and police believe it was possible that in an attempt to visit them on the way back home, the men may have taken a wrong turn near Orwell that put them on the mountainous road. So what this means is that Gary Matthias somehow managed to basically
convince the group
to go visit his friends in Forbestown, and they took a wrong turn, and then things just got out of hand. Police also believe that instead of going back down the road where they had passed the lodge that Joe Shones later returned to and found help there by the manager, they continued along the road in the direction they were originally going. So they must have realized this is the wrong turn, but instead of turning back, they just kept going. That's strange, right?
Pretty strange.
Also, it's worth mentioning that the day before the men went missing, this was the 23rd of February, a Forest Service snowcat had gone along the road in that direction to clear snow off the trailer roof so it would not collapse. It was possible, police believed, that the group had decided to follow those tracks left by that snowcat in the belief that shelter was not too far away. Most likely Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling died of hypothermia about halfway through the long walk to the trailer. Police think that once the remaining trio found the trailer, they broke the window to enter because the trailer was locked. After Ted died, or after Jack and Gary assumed that Ted had died, both of them decided to try to get back to civilization by different ways, such as walking over land, and both most likely perished in the forest. Okay, let's jump to the questions, because we did prepare some questions, I guess, for ourselves, basically. Some things that are basically very strange. So let's talk about the car. So my question would be, why did the group abandon this car when they could have pushed it out of the snow? Why did the car not have any damage despite having been driven a long distance up a mountain road with many bumps and ruts? And also, why was the car left unlocked and one of the windows was down? Because Jack Madruga, he loved his car. He would not leave it in this condition. So it's strange because the car apparently been in mint condition, so it was driven safely, but it was left unlocked and one of the windows was down. This indicates to me that they left in a hurry, because if they didn't leave in a hurry, they would have locked up the car.
Exactly.
Something made them
Panic.
rush.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
I think they panicked. I really think they did.
I think so, yeah.
It was also, I read somewhere that there was also a half-eaten chocolate bar that was dropped in a hurry inside a car.
Oh.
By the door.
That's not good.
Yeah.
That's not good. Another set of questions I have regarding Joe Shones. Remember Joe Shones, the man who apparently saw the men? Well, was Mr. Shones' sighting real, or was he hallucinating? Also, if he did see the boys, did the boys have a flashlight on them? You know, because he did report seeing a flashlight. Now, if we can connect that rusted flashlight that was found close to Jack Hewitt's body, then yeah, maybe it was the boys' flashlight. Exactly. And was there a pickup, or was Mr. Shones delirious from the pain? Because you remember what Mr. Shones said. Mr. Shones said at first that he heard a group of people and he shouted them twice, and they just mysteriously gone silent. But then he also remembers a pickup truck driving by. So these are two different sightings. So my question is, was the second sighting a real sighting?
That's a good question.
Probably not, right? Because he also said to law enforcement that he was most likely delirious from the pain.
But it could also be real. Maybe the driver of that red pickup truck just was too fearful to go near him.
I don't think it was red, but it wasn't mentioned that it was red. I don't think it was just a pickup truck, but I think, if it was a red pickup truck, then maybe that Brownsville store sighting has
It was
any.
the boys.
It was the boys. No, it's just too much, right? Also, let's talk a little bit about Ted Weir. Why did Ted starve to death in the trailer when he had an ample supply of food and heating materials nearby? Why was his body found on a bed with 8 sheets wrapped around it, including the head, but he wasn't wearing any thicker clothes that were right there? And whose golden watch was found in the trailer? So I think most of these questions we already answered through the I guess flow of the show, but you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, well, to answer your first question, Ted had a lack of basic common sense, remember that? Maybe he didn't know how to open those boxes or cans of food, but Gary was with him.
Yeah.
So he probably opened those cans before he left Ted. Probably the question is, did they leave Ted when he was sick? Or did Ted got sick all on his own?
Or did they leave Ted when he was already dead?
That's a good question.
Maybe they only left because Ted died. Maybe they wouldn't have left Ted all alone there. Surely Ted wouldn't have survived, especially in the condition that he was in, wrapped up in like 6 or 8 blankets.
Maybe they tried to revive him.
Maybe they did, but I feel like at the end of the day, Ted most likely died, and the two left. Maybe separate ways. Maybe Gary left first, and he said, just stay here, I'll come back with help. And Gary never returned.
And he took Ted's shoes with him?
Yeah, and then Jack, after a while, thought, well, Gary hasn't returned in a while. Maybe he's in trouble. I need to go find Gary. He ventures out, dies. It is strange that he died only 2 miles away, because if he already made the trek from the car to the trailer and survived, that was 20 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Now he died 2 miles away from the trailer? He already survived the 20-mile walk. Now he died after walking just 2 miles. That's suspicious, don't you think?
Yeah, but maybe it's also because he probably lost some of his weight.
Yeah, true, but there were ample supplies of food. Who knows, maybe Jack Hewitt was actually eating.
Good point.
That's a good point. And the last question I have would be regarding Gary Matthias, but I think you already answered it in the beginning of our podcast. I was curious whether Gary Matthias actually was a close friend with the rest of the men, and why was he even part of this basketball team if he wasn't even mentally handicapped? Because I was under the assumption that this team was only for mentally handicapped people. But he was there, maybe they were kind of loose with who they allowed to this basketball team. But as you mentioned earlier, I don't think that Gary Matthias was a super close friend.
Mm-hmm. Maybe they maintained a friendship, but Gary's friendship with the rest of the boys wasn't as deep.
Exactly.
Right?
He was just part of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the team, but that was pretty much it. All right, folks, now let's jump to the theory. So the theory section of the podcast. So I have a fairly strong way I'm leaning towards, mainly because of the information that I've found. So I'm just going to quickly read my note on the theory, and Rain can add her 2 cents as well. So I think that Gary somehow convinced the group to head towards Forbstown, not Yuba City, but the group made a wrong turn, and eventually they got stuck in the mountains and were trying to get the car out of the snow for a while. They must have heard Joe Schoen's screams, and they got scared and spooked out. Perhaps Gary was the one who got paranoid and urged the group to find the shelter. Now, along the road towards the shelter, Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling died of hypothermia. The remaining 3 men managed to find shelter at a trailer about 19.4 miles away from the car. Now, the 3 men had survived for some time, but eventually Gary Matthias and Jack Hewitt ventured out to find help, leaving Ted Weir behind. Perhaps Ted was already dead at that point. Now, Jack didn't make it far. He died around 2 miles away from the trailer, and Gary most likely also died somewhere in the forest, but his remains had not been found. So that's my general thinking. What are your thoughts on this case?
I think you make a really good point. Yeah, but we also have to remember Gary had a schizophrenia, right?
Yeah.
And then he had a daily medication. So during that night, he probably already took one pill or maybe a couple, his daily dose of medication. So there would be less chances for him to take or for his paranoia to kick in. But what if Joe's screams actually triggered those?
Yeah, could be.
Right?
And remember, he was, part of the military at one point. I'm not really sure if he's seen action, like actual warfare. No, but he, maybe something triggered. And I mean, he did develop schizophrenia during his military service, which is a pretty hardcore daily life. And if he developed, that schizophrenia under those conditions, maybe those conditions or anything similar to those conditions could bring it back. So, for example, a strange place, a man in the distance is shouting, maybe something
screaming for help,
and then he got triggered, like, what's happening? Let's go. You know what I mean? And urged the guys to keep moving.
Yeah, and that would explain why they left in a panic.
I think so, because the things that we already talked about, the fact that the window was down, the car wasn't locked, and there was a Snicker bars or like a chocolate bar on the ground, I think indicates that they did rush.
Yeah, because remember, it was Jack Madruga's car, and it was his baby, so he never would have left the window down when he's in the right state of mind or he's not panicking.
Exactly. And why would he do that? He rushed.
Yeah.
He panicked.
He was scared.
I mean, there are some other theories that maybe Gary Matthias is actually still alive. What are your thoughts about that? That Gary actually survived?
For me, it's quite unlikely, but we also have to take into consideration the fact that he managed to walk 500 miles before.
That's
that could
crazy.
Be true.
Yeah, that's crazy. So this Gary Matthias guy, he is crazy though. We have to remember that he is a freak of nature to some extent. So is he still alive, living under some different identity, mistaken identity? I mean, anything's possible, I believe, but I
somehow have a feeling that he died somewhere in there.
Yeah, maybe he made it far though. Maybe he made it far. Maybe he was
too far.
Maybe he was the first one to leave the trailer, left Jack to take care of Ted. He died somewhere in the forest. Ted died in the trailer, and Jack died trying to find shelter, trying to find someone, trying to find Gary. He also died.
And that could also be the reason why his shoes were in the trailer. Maybe he was of sound mind. Well, probably not. Maybe he's the only one with the military experience, so he offered to walk and find civilization, but he only had tennis shoes. What if he had an idea of exchanging his tennis shoes to Ted's shoes so he can walk even further?
Ted had leather shoes, right?
Yeah, the leather shoes.
Exactly. So he was definitely had common sense, just schizophrenia. He was crazy, but he had common sense.
Yeah.
So definitely a likely thing that he did.
Yeah, he probably did walk, probably took Ted's shoes, but we also have to remember that he's taking daily medication. So what if days passed and he wasn't able to take his medications, then his paranoia kicked in, his illness kicked in, and that led him astray.
Exactly. I mean, he was a ticking time bomb to begin with, because they could have survived for a year and someone would have found them, but Gary ran out of his meds eventually. So he was a ticking time bomb. And it's crazy to think about, you know what I mean? He may have been okay for a while, but once those meds run out, it doesn't matter if you have shelter. Gary without meds, it's a bad combination.
Yeah, that is true.
I mean, it's a mysterious case.
Definitely.
But I think we kind of cracked it.
A little bit, yeah.
I feel like we cracked it.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think it's a good time to wrap it up, don't you think? Good first pilot episode. I enjoyed it.
I definitely enjoyed it as well. This was intriguing and definitely scary.
Yeah, scary, spooky. Guys, please leave your thoughts in the comment section. What do you think we could improve upon? Did you like this podcast?
And your theories. Don't forget your theories.
Yeah, leave your thoughts. What actually happened?
We'd love to hear them.
Exactly. And contact us. We will set up a Gmail account. We will set up a ton of things for the podcast in the future. For now, the best ways to contact us still are probably the YouTube channel comment section. But stay tuned and we'll join you the next time with some more interesting mysteries. And we'll talk to you soon, guys. Take care.
Take care. Oh, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, guys. Bye.